We are a nation divided. That's what they tell us, right? This chasm between us. But what they don't tell you, what doesn't make the news, is this. We carry each other forward. No matter who we are, or what we believe, or where we come from. We've had the privilege to carry a century of humanity. Lovers, fighters, leaders. But maybe what we carry isn't just people, it's an idea. That while we're not the same, we can be one. And all it takes is the willingness to dare.
So let's have a conversation about culture. I believe that culture is everything. And in everything, we can find culture. And we, every single one of us sitting here in this room today, has the power to influence culture in ways we don't often realize. We are the gatekeepers of culture. Because you see, today, culture isn't only found in the grand rooms of the Met, or in the halls of Lincoln Center, or deep in the National Archives. Culture is everywhere and in everyone. Yes, it's art and music and fashion and architecture, but it's also culinary, or parenting, or gardening, or tech, or travel, or even the coffee that we drink, or the watch that we wear on our wrist. Pretty much any industry that you can think of has an underlying culture within. Now, the reason why culture is so important to us is because it gives us a sense of fulfillment and acceptance. It feeds our curiosities, and the more that we know about it, the more that we are open to others in our society. So what if we were to take it a step further, and what if the brands and businesses we let into our worlds are held to the same standard of authentic fulfillment that culture gives us? And what if, in turn, those brands are rewarded with profits and loyalty for advancing culture? In our hyper-connected society today, we've been given the access to information and news more than ever before. And we're seeing a shift in balance as to who controls cultural conversations. We no longer simply accept whatever message a brand wants to dictate to us about who we are. We, the gatekeepers sitting here today, have a power to influence brands more than ever before. Let me give you an example about what I mean by telling you a story about the little boy that you see on screen. This little boy grew up in Liberty City, Miami, which has a population predominantly made up of African Americans and Latinos, one of the highest crime rates in the States, and a median household income of about $22,000. This little boy grew up without a father. His parents separated when he was young, because the father thought the little boy wasn't his. And his mother struggled with addiction, so another woman had to take the little boy in and help raise them as best she could. That little boy went on to attend Miami Northwestern Senior High School, which was by far one of the worst high schools in the state. It consistently received a D or an F in academic performance. Now, based on everything that I'm telling you, this little boy is probably the last person you'd expect to influence culture. But somehow he finds a way to overcome all of those challenges and makes it to college, where he realizes that he has a really, really good eye for film. And in fact, after college, he leaves the state of Florida and makes a break for Hollywood. Now, where the story gets really remarkable is in what happens next to this little boy. Through mutual friends, he's connected to another writer who also grew up in Liberty City and was in the process of writing an autobiography about his own upbringing. And that autobiography resonated so deeply with this little boy that he decided to turn it into a movie. That movie, called Moonlight, went on to win the Oscar for Best Picture at this year's Academy Awards. If you haven't guessed it by now, that little boy is writer and director Barry Jenkins. It's amazing to me that that little boy with such a troubling background and upbringing could go on to affect culture the way that he did. And that's obvious to all of us because he spoke to us so beautifully and so authentically. But if you dig a little deeper, you'd find that a business was also a winner. You see, I'm sure that the company A24, which was behind the production of Moonlight, is not complaining about the fact that a movie with a $1.5 million production budget went on to gross over $65 million worldwide. That's a pretty nice return on investment. And it was all driven by a unique desire to speak to culture with authenticity. Now, it should be obvious that culture drives the bottom line. And we, again, the gatekeepers sitting in this room today, drive culture. But that cultural relevance is the secret sauce that big brands are constantly looking to cook up. And in our hyper-connected society of today, we no longer simply accept whatever message a brand wants to tell us. We have the power to influence brands. I've seen this shift up close and personal. I spent the better part of the last 5 years working with an incredibly talented group of communicators at Cadillac. And our challenge was to introduce this iconic brand to a new generation of consumers. And what we found very early on was that if we wanted to be relevant, everything we did to communicate our values needed to come from a place of authenticity and credibility. And along the way, I had a bit of a realization myself. Because you see, the customer that Cadillac looked to make a connection with sounded a lot like me. That customer came from a metropolitan environment, has a diverse background, so you don't know if he is black or white or Latino or another racial makeup. Millennial, entering his prime years of buying power, could be single, could be married, could be gay, could be heterosexual, values individuality and believes that tomorrow will be better than today, just like a lot of us sitting here today. So I thought to myself, well, if I'm the target, I can use my diversity of thought and my diversity of background to help this iconic brand win. And along the way, I no longer viewed our customer as our target, but more so as my peer. And just like Barry Jenkins, I used my unique experiences and background to build a cultural connection with others. But you would be surprised how many brands miss the mark when looking to influence us. When looking to build a cultural connection with us, they just simply don't understand our culture. Prime example, Pepsi. How many of you guys remember the backlash that Pepsi received earlier this year for that ad with Kendall Jenner? Now, we don't need to get into the specifics, and I'm sure that the team behind the ad were well-intentioned, but clearly they missed the mark when they believed that a can of soda could turn the culture of activism and make it look like Coachella. And Pepsi is not the only one. How many of you guys have seen this ad from Nivea to promote a new line of clear deodorant? I guess no one caught the racial undertones. But to make it even worse, this ad was targeted at customers in the Middle East. And what about United Airlines? With their customer service disaster earlier this year, an argument could be made that they got so caught up in their own internal red tape that they lost sight of the most basic culture of human decency and empathy for others. Now, there's no blanket strategy about how brands can communicate to culture authentically. But there are some things that we can learn from the way that we interact as people every day that can serve as guidance. Number one, listen. Interacting with others requires two-way dialogue. You have to learn about what is of importance to the community that you want to be accepted by. And you can't learn how to interact if you don't know what to say. Number 2, make impossible things possible. Look to engage the community that you want to be accepted by adding value. It'll be much easier for that community to accept you if you're not only speaking their language, but enabling something to happen. Number 3, people first, everything else second. Now look, this one is a hard one because it requires giving up a bit of control. But we know when we are being taken advantage of, and we reject those that do so. And number 4, don't hijack culture. Look, make no mistake, every single one of us in this room, we are all cultural appropriators. But are we also appreciators? There's a difference. Cultures requires cultivation. And if you simply hijack and appropriate, you lose credibility. Now, if you think about it, we apply these 4 basic principles in our everyday lives about everything that we're passionate about. We listen, we engage, we cultivate, we respect. And I've learned that if we take these 4 principles and apply them in business, we can leave a much more meaningful mark on our society. Just like Barry Jenkins did, just like Cadillac is looking to do. So the point is, culture is us. And we can, as the gatekeepers, we cannot allow ourselves to be hijacked, appropriated, and bankrupted. We work too hard to curate every aspect of our lives to make sure that we always have a sense of fulfillment. We should be able to hold the brands and businesses we let into our lives to the same standards. Thank you.